Israel and the United States are currently experiencing strained relations.
Record-breaking corn crop, it's actually creating a massive problem.
America's farmers already feeling the pinch are worried about the possibility of more challenges.
Well, soybean farmers in the U.S. continue to hang on for dear life as the president's trade dispute with China.
China slapped new tariffs on many items, including soybeans, which is a big product, of course, here at home.
Nations are quietly shifting their food supply chains northward, choosing Canada's corn over America's. What's unfolding goes far beyond economics. It touches every dinner table, every farm, and every rural town that once relied on U.S. agriculture. From Asia to the Middle East, the list of countries turning away from American grain has become impossible to ignore. 7. South Korea. In a nation built on speed, precision, and cutting-edge technology, South Korea expected its agricultural imports to match the same standards that power its electronics and automobile industries. Buyers demanded not just quality corn, but full transparency, real-time tracking, blockchain verification, and instant documentation. Canada delivered flawlessly. Every shipment arrived tagged with QR codes linking back to farm-level data, harvest conditions, and transport logs. By contrast, American shipments lagged behind, often relying on outdated paperwork scattered across multiple systems, some still handwritten. At Busan's port, a U.S. cargo sat untouched for nearly 3 weeks, because inspectors couldn't verify its origin. The corn itself was fine. The process wasn't. The comparison was devastating. While American grain was stalled in red tape, Canadian shipments were cleared in 48 hours and delivered with scientific precision. Samsung's food division locked in a massive order from Manitoba, citing Canadian reliability as unmatched. Within 2 years, South Korea's supply chain had been rebuilt around Canadian partnerships, cutting delays, slashing paperwork, and improving efficiency across industries. America didn't lose this market to politics. It lost it to inefficiency. 6. Egypt. Egypt's decision wasn't about technology, it was about survival. For decades, American corn fed the ovens that supplied bread to more than 100 million people. But unpredictable U.S. policies, sudden tariffs, sanctions, and erratic trade rules exposed how fragile that reliance had become. When one U.S. shipment sat idle at port for 2 weeks due to new rules, bakeries in Cairo were forced to ration flour. That single event turned doubt into alarm. Canadian suppliers entered with a different offer: long-term stability. Multi-year contracts, guaranteed delivery schedules, and airtight documentation. The results spoke for themselves. Canadian shipments not only arrived on time, but improved efficiency in Egyptian mills by over 10%. Within months, Egypt signed a 5-year contract worth nearly $1 billion annually, locking in Canadian grain as its new foundation of food security. 5. Saudi Arabia. For Saudi Arabia, the stakes were even higher. A desert kingdom importing more than 80% of its food discovered through security simulations that its entire food system could collapse in weeks if Washington tightened controls. America still dominated every channel of supply, leaving Riyadh dangerously exposed. When a U.S. shipment was delayed under what appeared to be a political inspection, Saudi planners decided enough was enough. Canada became the alternative. Free from U.S. ports, U.S. banks, and U.S. politics, Canadian grain shipments came with what mattered most: independence. Within 3 years, 2/3 of Saudi Arabia's grain imports came from Canada. Billions in Saudi investment followed, funding Canadian infrastructure, irrigation technology, and agricultural research. Food security had become a strategic partnership, and America was written out of the contract. 4. Vietnam. Vietnam's shift was quiet but devastating. A simple 12-word message ended decades of reliance, switching to Canadian suppliers effective immediately. Thanks for everything. For years, Vietnam's farmers had endured unpredictable feed costs, stalled deliveries, and political shocks driven by U.S. trade disputes with China. Corn wasn't just an ingredient, it was the backbone of an entire economy, from fish farms to rice paddies. When Canadian grain proved consistent and insulated from geopolitical turbulence, Vietnam didn't hesitate. By 2025, nearly 90% of its corn imports came from Canada. Canadian firms invested further, building research centers, funding scholarships, and collaborating on climate-resilient farming. Vietnam's departure wasn't a whisper. It was a tidal wave across Southeast Asia. 3. Japan. In Japan, the change was clinical and precise. For decades, America supplied the bulk of its corn, but testing in Japanese labs revealed troubling inconsistencies, fluctuating moisture levels, uneven protein content, and slipping quality control. For Japan's manufacturing economy, built on perfection, these deviations were unacceptable. Regulations soon required traceability of every imported input. Canadian suppliers were already equipped with blockchain tracking systems. American exporters were not. Within 4 years, Canadian firms controlled 2/3 of Japan's imports. What emerged wasn't just trade, it was a technological alliance. 2. China. But the true earthquake came in Beijing. China's Food Security Review revealed a disturbing truth. Despite its global sourcing, too much of its supply still depended on U.S. infrastructure. A single political decision in Washington could jeopardize the diets of 1.4 billion people. For China, this was intolerable. The solution? A massive strategic agreement with Canada. Over 2 million tons of corn, wheat, and canola moved through non-U.S. routes, financed through Canadian banks, and delivered on schedules Washington could never disrupt. With that, America's grip on the world's largest agricultural market began to slip. 1. Mexico. And then came the deepest cut. Mexico. For more than 70 years, the U.S. and Mexico shared one of the smoothest agricultural relationships in the world. Mexican tortilla factories and livestock farms were built on U.S. corn. It wasn't just business, it was trust. But that trust eroded with every new U.S. trade shift, from the collapse of NAFTA to the rollout of USMCA. Mexican producers grew tired of uncertainty. When Canada offered stability and neutrality, Mexico made the leap. For Washington, it wasn't just a lost customer, it was the betrayal of its closest partner. From South Korea to Mexico, America's agricultural dominance is unraveling, not because of hostile politics, but because other nations now see Canada as the smarter, steadier choice. This isn't just trade, it's a rewriting of global food security, and the consequences for U.S. farmers, workers, and rural communities may last for generations.